Good afternoon. Last Sunday, we had beautiful quilts in the lobby and all on all the pews in the sanctuary. Our quilters put together over 80 quilts this year, along with dozens of personal care kits and over 100 school kits that we assembled. On Tuesday, we packed them all up in boxes to get them ready to send to Lutheran World Relief. They will distribute them to families all around the world. What a wonderful ministry to bless our neighbors in need. This week in our one-year chronological Bible readings, we continued through the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st Chronicles. The books of Chronicles were compiled hundreds of years later when the people had come back from exile in Babylon. They copy, word for word, many passages from the books of Samuel and Kings, but also make some significant changes and edits. Chronicles highlights the roles of the priests, giving more specific details about them and the temple. Chronicles also leaves out some unflattering stories about David and adds additional positive stories about him to showcase him as the ideal king who points toward a future messianic king. At the end of 1st Samuel, the Philistines defeated Saul and his army. Saul's 3 sons were killed, including Jonathan's, David's friend, and Saul was soon wounded so badly that he fell on his own sword and died. Abner, the commander of Saul's army, made Saul's son king over Israel, but that didn't last long. David grew stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker. Eventually, Abner went over to David's side, but David's commander Joab murdered Abner in revenge for his own brother's death. Then Saul's son was murdered, paving the way for David to become king over Israel as well. Eventually, all of Israel and Judah came together to crown David their king and became unified under him. David was very successful in driving out Israel's enemies. He conquered the city of Jerusalem and made it his capital. He had the Ark of God brought to the city and danced in the procession. David's wife, Michal, Saul's daughter, despised David for dancing in the streets. David replied that he had danced before the Lord and that he would become even more undignified than this to bring honor to God. Michal never had children, bringing an end to the house of Saul. After he had built a palace for himself, David wanted to build a temple to house the ark rather than the tent the ark had been staying in. But God told David that he would build a house for David instead. A dynasty of kings. Samuel 7 is a key chapter in the Old Testament. It points to a future king who would build a temple for God and whose royal line would last forever. Even when he and the people of Israel failed and suffered the consequences, God would stay true to his promise. The prophets picked up on this promise and pointed to the coming of the Messiah, the true king who would establish his eternal reign of justice and peace. He would fulfill God's promise to Abraham to use his descendants to bless all the nations. David showed kindness to Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, who was crippled in both feet. David brought him to live in Jerusalem and had him eat at the king's table. But that's not where his story ends. The books of Samuel and Kings, as well as Chronicles, describe the overlapping rise and fall of Saul and David. The tragic story of Saul, who was prideful and dishonest, serves as a warning for us to reflect on our own flaws and deal with our dark side. David, on the other hand, trusted God. He did not attempt to kill Saul, even when Saul was hunting him. When Saul and his son Jonathan died, David lamented for them. These stories, as well as the parallel passages in Chronicles, point to the hope of a greater king who will rule with justice and mercy over all the earth. Jesus is that messianic king from David's line, who has been crowned king of all creation through his suffering, death, and resurrection. Every time we pray the Lord's Prayer, we ask for God's kingdom to come in its fullness here on earth as it is in heaven. In the description of today's post, I am including a link to the Bible Project's helpful video and guide to the books of Chronicles. I hope to see you for worship this Sunday at 8:30 and 11 o'clock. At 9:45, we have Sunday school and our new adult class called Disciple Orientation, Purposeful Living. Everyone is welcome to join us as we talk about God's purposes for our lives. Have a great week.